Hello and welcome to Sync Music Matters, a podcast that explores the beautiful relationship between music and the moving image. My name's Jim Holstrip and I'm your host on this journey, as each week I chew the fat with industry professionals who, on a daily basis, work with music for visuals. Now you might immediately assume that I'm talking about composers, but I'm also talking about editors, music supervisors, directors, and anyone else who's involved with the synchronous process of pairing audio and visuals. In this episode, I'm talking to Universalproductionmusic's senior producer, Andrew Stannard. So, what can you expect from today's chit-chat? Well, Andrew and I reveal our shared love for 80s TV themes, and Andrew even posits a theory about why strong melodic hooks were such a staple back then. If you've listened to any other episodes of Sync Music Matters, you will know that I harbour a deep, deep love for obscure TV, film and music-related trivia, and Andrew brings more music trivia gold to the table than you can shake a stick at. He blows my mind with a revelation about an 80s game show theme, which it turns out was written by one of Hollywood's biggest composers. He also brings my world crashing down when he informs me that one of my favourite TV themes was in fact plagiarised, and I've not felt such disappointment since the realisation that Santa Claus and my dad had the same handwriting. Andrew is obviously a mine of information about production music generally. We chat about the golden age of the 70s, how the production music landscape has changed over time, and we also try to break down what makes a great production music track, from using unique sonic textures to splicing unexpected genres. He also has some very sound advice for anyone who would like to get into production music. As ever, links to all the music discussed can be found in the show notes, and I highly recommend checking them out. You can find show notes on your preferred podcast platform or on my website, larpmusic.com/Sync Music Matters podcast. And Sync Music Matters podcast is hyphenated. Andrew Stannard is a senior producer for Universal Production Music. He's worked in production music for over 20 years, starting off as a music supervisor for Zomba, moving into sales for BMG, before joining the production music department at Universal. He's produced countless albums in all manner of genres and has worked with seasoned media composers as well as beatmakers, electronic producers and specialist composers. As well as producing new music for Universal, Andrew looks after an archive of old recordings on the Bruton and Chapel labels. He has supplied samples to artists like Danger Mouse and Disclosure, and through this had a hand in the worldwide #1 hit record Crazy by Gnarls Barkley. Andrew Stannard, thanks for joining me.
Lovely to talk to you. Yeah, lovely to see you too.
I am actually going to just reference the fact that sometimes in life we have these awkward situations whereby people might be getting our name wrong. And Andrew revealed to me earlier today that actually and I've known you for 6 or 7 years?
Yep.
I've been getting his name wrong for 6 or 7 years. In my defence, though, I've always known how it's spelt. I think it's a northernism. I think we northerners don't like extraneous consonants, so instead of saying Stannard, I've said Stannard. So yes, Andrew Stannard. Thanks for joining me.
But I think it's one of those things where when it's gone so far, it's just too old now. You can't go back now. So you just leave it. Don't worry about it. But
well, this is it. It's that awkwardness where had we not done this podcast today, then there might not have been the context for you correcting me, so it would have gone on for years and years. So not only is podcasting hopefully sort of insightful and informative, but it also provides a context for correcting people when they've been saying your name wrong.
No worries. No, that's fine.
Brilliant. Yeah, so, well, thanks very much for joining me. I'm going to start with the first question that I start with every guest, which is if we were to sort of rewind to when you were sort of any time between sort of 5 or 10 years old and you sort of got asked that kind of typical question of, hey, what would you like to be when you grow up? What would you have responded?
I didn't know that question was coming, actually. It's good. So it's quite interesting, actually, because I don't think... Well, I certainly didn't know about production music, so I had no idea about this whole world that I work in at the moment. So age 5, I knew I wanted to be involved in music. The thing is, I was quite unusual. I was drawn to music. So a lot of kids, they get told to play the piano. You must go and do your practice. You must, try and learn an instrument. And I was just drawn to it. I had this strange fascination with sound. I get told stories about when I was a baby, my granddad would put classical music on and I'd sit upright and be like, what's this? What's going on? And then we had this piano and I just went to the piano and basically found chords and sounds and really play by ear right from the start. But what did I want to be? I wanted to be a policeman. I mean, I wanted to catch robbers, and like, yeah, that was exciting. I wanted to be out there doing what I seen on television. So yeah, that was like the thing that I wanted to do. But then I think all through my life, I've always known that music was a thing that I was drawn to. How the hell that would turn up to be what I do now, I don't know. But like, so let's say policeman. If that's the answer you're looking for.
Was policeman? Was there any? Because I interviewed Todd Baker a few weeks ago, and it came about that he wanted to be a fighter pilot off the back of watching Top Gun. Was there a particular sort of TV show that you'd seen that made you want to be a policeman?
I mean, there's things like TJ Hooker. I don't know, like any cop shows like The Bill, anything with cars racing around catching robbers. I mean, it looked really exciting. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that I was really drawn to that. But yeah, thank God I didn't go down that road. I don't think I would have been a very good cop. But
weirdly, it was something I entertained at some point as well. Even actually, probably nearing sort of A-level time, where I sort of thought I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I kind of thought about police, and then I kind of decided that I wouldn't actually be able to deal with the things that police have to see on a day-to-day basis. I don't think I would be able to see that and cope mentally. Yeah. So I sort of...
Well, personally, I think I could cope with the discipline, having to say, like, yes, sir, no, sir, and whatever, to your boss and your seniors. I couldn't, and the hours, I can't get up that time of the day. That's terrible. No way. I can't do that. So, yeah, thankfully, steered away from that.
Yeah. And going back to what you mentioned about the piano, can you remember how old you were when you started? And was there a particular kind of seminal moment where, you know, piano seemed like a logical thing to do?
Okay, so my musical thing is basically, it's really strange. First of all, I started, my nan used to have these brass sort of ornaments. I used to hit the brass ornaments because they had a certain kind of ring. So I was like drawn to sound in a weird way, and that was obviously, there's vibrations, there's sound going on, and it was like really exciting my ears. That's before the piano. Then the piano, we had a piano, which my mum got because she was bored and wanted to play some piano. And then she would play something, I'd be like, play it again, mum, play it again. And then I would go to the piano, and so it's age probably 3.5, 4. And what it was is just hit notes, think, oh, that's a nice sound. Hit 2 notes, oh, that's interesting. What happened? Oh, those. And then I was hearing, I mean, now I look back and I was hearing fourths and fifths and those pulses you get between different intervals, and like how that sounds. You go to a seventh and you're like, oh, that's like a. So I was kind of drawn to the sensation in my ears of what sound was doing, and then I realised, you can play tunes as well, and like that was fun. And really, my whole musical background's been playing by ear. I have had to force myself to read music, and that happened really late on. I tend to just play TV themes. I was really into TV themes. Quite weird as a child. It's quite nice where I've ended up though, how that was when I was back in as a kid. So I'd hear something off the telly and I'd work out how to play it. And then my mates would be like, that's really cool. And then that's the first time in my life I knew there was a payoff for music. So you could play, so I'm a person of the 80s, I'm revealing my age here. But like, so it's like Kids from Fame theme. I played that, and all my mates were like, wow, do it again. And then I ended up playing for an assembly we had at school, in my primary school. And everybody walked in, I had to play Kids from Fame theme. And it was like, I still remember, I was like, and everyone was like, that was so cool. I was like, okay, this music thing's pretty good. Because you get, I mean, I'm mentioning that because it was just like a nice thing. But
yeah, sure. I think as well at that age to be able to do something that people kind of marvel at is probably maybe the first time you sort of go, oh, wow, the realisation that actually not everyone can do that.
I think also because it wasn't classical music. Everyone else was like, here's my Mozart piece. And then I was playing Kids from Fame, which had like a pretty groovy bass line. It's quite kind of a disco kind of funk thing. And it was like, oh, you're playing music, which is like pop music. And, that was where I really liked classical music, but I knew there was more cachet to be doing the other stuff. But so I was aged about 4 when I started off.
Wow. Well, and as well, it's worth mentioning that actually theme tunes in the 80s were amazing. They're like some of the best TV theme tunes ever written, I think, came out of the 80s, both kids' music, but also you sort of think like stuff like Quantum Leap, The A-Team, Knight Rider. It was back in a day where you had a real theme that set the scene and sort of, which, I don't know, I kind of feel has been maybe lost a little bit today, certainly in sort of film and television. There's not, the theme isn't quite so cool as it used to be.
So, yeah, there's a story behind that. I was reading this article that Daniel Pemberton wrote, actually, and it's all about the fact that, so the story is basically the theme tune was like, come in from the kitchen, you're making a tea, mum, soap opera starting, come in, and it would draw you in. So you knew, and it was like there was a lot of time they needed for people to stop what they were doing and come to the television. So it was like, but now, because video on demand and it's just instant, you don't need to have that long period to try and get people to stop what they're doing and go to the television and be drawn to it. So yeah, this ridiculous thing now, you have 20 seconds. It was like a minute and a half, 2 minutes sometimes.
And have you ever heard the Going for Gold theme tune?
Well, there's a classic, yeah. Who wrote that? Hans Zimmer.
Was it?
Yeah, there's a little bit of trivia. So I know that I'm jumping into early bit. So Hans Zimmer famously wrote the Going for Gold theme tune when he was just looking for cash.
That is amazing. That is the best bit of trivia I've ever heard. I did not know that.
I thought that's why you mentioned it. I thought that's the reason why you brought it up.
But no, because there's actually an extended version. So there's the TV theme tune, but then there's also sort of like this really long version where they sort of like go off on one, sort of like talking. But it makes total sense that it's Hans Zimmer that did it because it's an incredible piece of music. Wow. And he was quite prevalent in the 80s, wasn't he? He was doing a lot of sort of 80s. What was the band that he was in the 80s?
Well, he did something with Buggles. I remember he was like,
yes, that was the Buggles. Yeah.
A Video Killed the Radio Star. And but back in the day, when that was like a way to get your cash, and it still is now, and you can go from that into a different career. But
I'm just waiting for the day that that sort of like heavy themes come back because I'm a sucker for a good melody.
I was talking about this, and like I really long for the days of big theme tunes coming out, and they do that now with Netflix, but you can skip. And it's true now that because we're binge watching. So I remember The Wire, and it's a great song at this front. It's got this. The theme tune's great, but you're binging it, so you do want to skip it because you don't want to. So it's not the same TV experience. It's not like once a week. Here's Dallas. But one day maybe there'll be some more theme tunes because they were. So what drew me to them was like, you have to do a lot of work, and in a minute you've got to catch people's attentions. You've got to get a great hook, you've got to get a great melody. A lot of effort goes into that. The sound of it, and I think I was drawn to that. I was drawn to this kind of like, just the effort that went into them. You got something back from it. I don't know.
So. Then fast forward. So what was the progression from wanting to be a Bobby to ending up? And what point did you sort of realize? Obviously, you sort of had an affinity for music. At what point did you kind of realize that could be a potential career opportunity? And then what were the sort of steps into music supervision and then sales and then production?
Okay, so the story is I play music at school. That's my thing. I get known as the guy who does music. It's clearly my main interest. I love all types of music. I'm playing in all different things at school. I do my GCSE. I do my A level. I go and study a degree in music. Obviously, if I'm going to do stuff further education, it's going to be music. So I'm doing all the education. To be honest, I rebelled against the education a bit because I was a bit sort of like, I can play it by ear. Why do I need to do your rules? Which is a bit stupid at the time. But anyway. And then when you finish your music degree, and essentially, you can, the people, your careers advisors say you can go and work in the Barbican or the Royal Festival Hall. Apart from that, you can teach maybe. Or apart from that, you can go down the route of trying to be an artist, recording artist, or maybe an engineer as well. So I had to really fight against becoming a music teacher. Everyone just expected me to be a music teacher. It was back in the day when we didn't have so many music tech courses. Engineering was quite a niche thing. Being an artist, I don't think I wasn't, I've been in some bands, but I wasn't like pop star material. I did once get, it's so annoying. So my teacher at school tried to get me to go and do some work experience at Airedale because he said, you should do some jingles, you should write jingles. And I had the opportunity of doing it. And I just said, I don't want to do that, it's rubbish. It's like a kid just going, no, I don't want to do that. And like now I'm like, that would have been brilliant. I could have started my career as like a writer doing that. I didn't really know about media composition. It wasn't an obvious place to go. It wasn't an obvious direction. So essentially, I do all my studying, I do all my qualifications. And then like, I literally was like, okay, where do I go from here? It wasn't obvious how to get a break into the music industry, which is really hard to get involved in, But so my main thing that happened to me, my mate's friends had a restaurant. And they wanted someone to play the piano in the background. It was easy money. I could noodle around. So I'm doing this for cash. I'm a student, just get some money. And this elderly couple come in and they say, would you like to play in a green room in this studio? It's a TV studio that they were working in. I didn't even know what a green room was, but I said, yeah. And anyway, long story short, I end up being a runner and also playing the piano for question time. So it was the weirdest experience. Basically, they used to put on question time. There would be David Dimbleby, there would be all these MPs. There would be a green room, they were having a drink. I'd be playing music thinking, this is weird. It's like, who's Gordon Brown up there? It's really weird, trying to concentrate on playing the piano. And then I did running as well because they were like, you can help out doing that. So essentially, my transition from degree to where I am now, I reckon that was really important work experience. So I started doing this TV stuff, and then this job came up in The Guardian, music researcher. I didn't know what the company was, but it sounded good, and I spent a lot of time on the CV. And I had this experience. I'd done some stuff in TV, I think that really helped on the CV. And then I go to this interview in Willesden and thinking, this has got to be the wrong place. This is a really weird place for a record company to be. But I saw some gold discs in the window and I thought, okay, this is right. And yeah, it was this world of library music I'd never heard of. And there was this job, music researcher. And, I think there was like so the things that really helped was that work experience, the fact that I had a real breadth of love of music. It wasn't just like one thing. I was at school. It was quite unusual back in the day when I was younger usually you'd be like into metal or you'd be into hip hop or you'd be into this and that. I loved everything and I really liked classical and world music and everything. So I had this kind of breadth of knowledge. And I kind of landed in this job basically looking at getting briefs from TV companies and trying to find CDs and tracks that would fit their brief, sending them in jiffy bags. It was very strange. So,
well, I think what's quite interesting there as well is actually you cite the work experience as the sort of defining factor, not necessarily the sort of GCSEs or the A-levels or maybe even the degree, but actually the thing that set you apart or stood you instead for getting that first job was work experience.
Yeah, it's a horrible truth, but I think you need the knowledge, you need the skills. I had a depth of knowledge that helped me. And you also need to be able to pair together, TV, music and CDs. And there's a thing that goes on that I could do. But yeah, to get over the line when it comes on these CVs coming in thousands of them for the person recruiting, it's like, yeah, that's what happens now as well. I think you do an internship or you get some experience somewhere. It kind of makes you seem like you've got a little bit extra, I suppose.
Yeah. So, you touched briefly there upon the idea that the experience was what you got through the door, but obviously you then had to be able to deliver. So you're getting searches through and you've got to find music that works. Putting music to picture or deciding what music works well to picture, do you think that's something that you can learn, or do you think that's just something that you have or don't have?
I think you can learn it. I think you can learn those skills. And I think the learning process can either start at the point where someone says you've got to do this, or it could start at the point where you're a child and you're drawn to all the music you hear in films and you're thinking about it in a really subliminal way, but you don't realise. So you're actually learning through your experience, because the weird thing about TV music is we're all watching TV, we're all watching films, a load of people are thinking about the dialogue and the action scenes. You know, as a kid, always I'd be thinking about the music. Even so now, which is quite ridiculous because I can't watch a film without dissecting the score. So, yes, the answer is you can learn it. But I think if you've grown up in a way, which a lot of people I work with and, you know, there's key people I know, have absorbed it in that way, then they've already got a head start. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. And just out of interest, when you listen to sort of songs rather than sort of TV music, did you pay any attention to the lyrics, or were you just focused on the music?
Okay, so I'm really weird because I find I'm always thinking about the music. I've got friends who can hear a song and she'll know all the lyrics immediately, can sing it back. Hip hop, I love hip hop, always thinking about the production, the beat, you know. So the answer is it's always the music, it's the sound.
Yeah, no, I was always exactly the same. The only time I started paying attention to lyrics was when I actually started writing them, when I started doing the singer-songwriter thing. But up until that point, the lyrics, you know, most songs I couldn't really tell you even what they were about because it was just always the sonics, the music, what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, there was a change. Obviously, a 16-year-old listening to the Smiths, you know, Morrissey talking about all his pains and that, you know, you're feeling yourself. There were moments in my life where lyrics became really powerful, like listening to Van Morrison. It's a little epiphanies where lyrics came to life. But I'd say, generally speaking, I'm always thinking about the music. It's weird. There's a thing I always talk about, like Stock Aitken and Waterman. I used to hate them when I was a kid, okay? I should be so lucky. I understood that was a really well-crafted song, so I knew that there was good composition going on there. But I remember thinking, I really hate this. And now, where I am now, I know why. It's because all their production was the same. They used the same sounds, the same settings, and there's a sonic thing going on which is boring and lazy, and it just didn't thrill me. And then it was the other people around there who were doing, oh, check out this sound, check out this synth. Oh, actually, no, what about this little thing here? And I was like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. You know, when you look now at what you thought of when you were a kid and you can see the reasons why.
Yep, absolutely. I suppose actually be a good time to sort of just clarify what production music is for anyone listening who doesn't know. How would you define production music?
So it used to be called library music, and that was changed because it was seen as being cool, like demeaning. But yeah, so production music is essentially music that's been created specifically for TV and film and all other media. And it's done speculatively. So you create something, you used to release a CD, I'm that old, and then it would go on a shelf in an editing suite in Soho. They'd say, quick, we need to get something in the background here. We need some sort of like atmosphere, some mood. And they'd use that track and they'd know that they could clear it. It was going to be affordable. It wasn't going to be a problem. And it was this little niche of music which would end up on countless TV programs in the background, or even as a theme. But it was just made by people guessing that, oh, this kind of sound seems to be really popular at the moment. We'll do the CD of this, and it would end up on TV. So it's kind of a weird. It's a library side. There was a library of tracks you could choose from, and yeah, I mean it's just a strange hidden world of music, I think.
Yeah, and it is a fascinating world, and I think a lot of people. Well, you yourself said that, you know, coming out of university, you didn't even really know what music for media was. That you didn't really know that production music or library music really existed. But you mentioned there that how, you know, it used to be sort of put out on a CD. So, and obviously there's some classic old pieces of library music. So like the Match of the Day and Grandstands, a lot of sort of sporting theme tunes from, is it probably even the 70s, was it? Late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah, I mean, the 70s was the golden era. So, I mean, there was the recent passing of Alan Hawkshaw, who I was lucky enough to get to know and work with. And, you know, he was responsible for, you know, the Countdown theme and, like, you know, Grange Hill. And, yeah, people have now realised that there's this huge wealth of great hits. And tunes that everyone knows, but you didn't realize where it came from. So yeah, I think there's more recognition now. There's that whole thing about people sampling the tracks, is what I've been involved in as well. There's beat hunters have been digging through library records in secondhand shops for years. So it's coming to the surface a bit more now, I think.
Yeah. And how has the landscape changed? Because you mentioned sort of before, you get a CD, you sort of put it out there, and obviously now that everything's gone digital, how has the kind of landscape, and therefore I suppose the music, changed over sort of like the past, what we're talking nearly 50 years?
Well, yeah, I mean...
No, I'm not saying that you were obviously...
No, I've not been here for 50 years.
Beginning.
We've been working for a long time in this business, but not that long. So basically, I mean, the way I see it, so you've got the golden era in the 70s. The recording equipment was amazing. The best session players in London will come in. Everything sounded brilliant. The 80s, we drifted into the world of synthesizers. Sometimes it got a little bit, not quite sure. Late 80s, early 90s was not a great period. Sonically, wasn't the production qualities weren't that great. Through the CD period, things really improved, and it's to do with technology and what people could do without going to a huge studio because the budgets were cut. Basically, the digital era essentially means quantity. It just means that everyone can put out live music. You don't have to spend a huge amount of money on pressing a Glassmaster or whatever it is, or is it Glassmaster? I think it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, the pressing of CDs and distribution of CDs is a full-scale, expensive thing to have to do. Digital means it's open to everyone. You can release as many tracks as you want daily. So the main thing I'd say was the competition has grown hugely, and so many more people making this music. But then weirdly, there's a democracy because there's people in their bedrooms who've got Ableton and they've made a great beat and it works and they can get a slice of this action, whereas before it would be a chosen few who knew the company and would go to studios and record. So there's kind of swings and balances, swings and roundabouts for both of them. But I don't know musically. I mean, musically, everything's basically, the competition is that basically people now expect us to make music which is exactly the same as a record company and the same quality, the same standards. It can be tricky because the amount that goes into a huge pop hit, they'll get mixes by the best mix engineers in the world. They'll get 3 or 4 of them, they'll choose it, they'll go back and tweak it. That's one track. So when you're producing on scale, it's quite hard to have everything sounding at that level. But we do, and the standards have got better. You can see that the way through, and there's some amazing pieces of music being released.
And I have a theory in my mind that basically once the sort of CD died and music moved online, obviously the record labels lost their primary source of revenue, which was selling physical copies, and all of a sudden we go to it wasn't even streaming, it was sort of like illegal downloads for a long time before streaming. But in my mind, because of that sort of major loss of revenue, all of a sudden record companies were then looking at alternative avenues, and where once upon a time sort of an artist doing sort of production music or even having sort of music synced for a TV ad and stuff was unheard of. All of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on a minute, here's a revenue stream that we can actually sort of keep going. Did that sort of influence the world of production music? Did you sort of see kind of bigger artists or labels or even producers starting to get involved with it?
Yeah, I think so. I think essentially you're absolutely right. Everyone realised this sync market there's money there. The people making the TV programs had to pay for it. They couldn't just do it illegally. Everyone started knocking the door before they weren't really interested. They were like, hey, can we get involved with what you're doing? It's like, so suddenly, yeah, you've got a quality of artists that their A&Rs maybe would have said, look, don't go down that road. And they're like, actually, do you know what? This is a really good idea. So you've got access to people who were being dissuaded from that. And yeah, I mean, it's because there was a stigma thing, which people aren't so worried about now. It's like people realize the value of a big sync, being the radio play that it used to be. So, let's be honest, people don't listen to the radio like they used to. But if you get a huge advert or a big promo or trailer, and people hear your music, so Love Island. How many people tune into Love Island? That's more than Radio 1, okay, or some show on Radio 1. You get your track on that, everyone hears it, they Shazam it, you've got something. That used to be radio. So this sync world has got value in it for the artist to get some money, but also as exposure, and that's changed as well, because, to get your music heard or above the pie, over the line.
Can you think? Do you know off the top of your head any artists that have sort of whose careers have been launched off the back of sort of getting a major sync?
So I was lucky enough to work with a guy called Matt Hales from a band called Aqualung, who were big in the early noughties, and basically Matt, his first hit came off the back of an advert. It was for a Beatle, I think. And he ended up on Top of the Pops, and it was great. And then he had a career. He toured with the band, got signed to publishing, and he's now a songwriter working with people like Leanne Havas and all sorts of people. He did an album with me as well, because his A&R realised this was a good way to get some extra revenue. So he had a start with the advertising. So I went to see Sigur Rós in Ali Pali, and brilliant bands. They've already made a name for themselves. Like they didn't need an advert to launch their career. But what was really interesting, there's a track which was used on a BBC promo for Life on Earth, I think it was, and the biggest cheer came for this track. And I was thinking, is that because that's become a bit of a hit? Because everyone was talking about it, people were Shazamming it. Who is this? What's this track? And like the crowd reacted as if to say this was a hit. And I wasn't sure.
Could well have been the TV show that
it was the promo which made that, like, oh, that tune. Oh yeah, that's the big one. Come on, let's have that. I don't know. For other people, there's probably more artists who've had a launch off an advert. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
That could be a good time to sort of segue into going under the skin. Under the skin.
There's a project I worked on, and it was released in 2020. We recorded just at the end of 2019, so we were lucky to get some recording in. And I worked through the early lockdown period. So what was interesting about this project, it was a collaboration between some guys who were electronic producers, and they had a career making beats, and they'd gone into production music. And then I wanted them to collaborate with this guy, Andrew Stannard, who's an amazing orchestrator and composer, and works with orchestras all the time, and great with that sound. So it was bringing together these two sides of things. And the guys, the electronic producers, hadn't really worked with an orchestra before, so it was kind of quite exciting. We had the chance to record in Abbey Road, which was like exciting as well. It's a nice place to go. So yeah, I mean, it was one of these things where I knew that there was a sound that TV loves, and essentially strings and orchestra give you scale, give you an epicness, but also give you quality and a lush sound. I knew that the sampled orchestras are great, but when you record, it sounds so much better. We did hybrid in the end. We did use both, but that live sound was really important.
And the beat makers, is it sort of like, are we talking sort of four to the floor, sort of housey techno type thing, or are they sort of breakbeat? Or
so the people, Ollie Holmes used to be in Bar 9. So his background is dubstep. He's moved away from that now because dubstep's not really the fashionable thing it used to be. So he's someone who's got a definite feel for like electronic music, bass, but also future bass and like hip hop and groove and stuff. So he's not really a house person; he's more like a groove person. The other guy was Digital Dog, and he did loads of remixes, and he can lend his hand to anything. So it could be like an EDM track, but also like a hip hop track. So it's more the skills of production and crafting that sonically and making it really jump out. There's skills there. People can make beat music and it can sound rubbish, but these guys are amazing.
Yeah, I suppose a good question is like what makes a good production music track?
That's the $1 million question. You know what? I mean, there's no one answer. It's like I've worked on tracks where I was like, I knew this was like a big tune, and it's gone on to be successful. Okay, so there's two things, first of all, to say. So a library music, production music track can be successful because you're working to the short form advertising market. So you're basically grabbing people's attention. You've got something which is gets your ears and makes you go, what's that? It can be used then in a theme tune, in a promo, in a trailer, or an advert. And that can make a lot of money if you get that right, and these tracks in this project I did at Abbey Road, some of them were really big and orchestra and beats. But then at the same time, you can make a lot of money by being something which just sits in the background but does a certain job, which is this weird world of not too negative, not too positive. It's sort of in between. It keeps the picture moving. A lot of production music is to do with keeping images moving. So you need motion and movement and kind of an underlying kind of feeling of pulse and stuff. So something that works along those lines can make a lot of money, but it's maybe not as an obvious sort of hit when you listen to it because it just sits in the background. I can't. There's no answer to what makes a great library track.
But what about structure as well? Because obviously, ultimately, the people that are working with production music are editors, and this is something I'm keen to explore on the podcast. Is it's about people who work with music and the moving image, and under that umbrella, I'm including editors and directors because they are involved on a day-to-day basis. And I always think editors, in many ways, are not gatekeepers, but they have quite a lot of power in terms of they're the ones who are sort of auditioning the shortlist, and quite often, unless they've got a hands-on director or producer, are making calls about what music to use. But obviously they're generally sort of telling some kind of, even if it's sort of like a short clip, there's sometimes a bit of a narrative arc, and they're using the music to support that. So what structurally goes into making a good library music track?
Well, there's some things that, over a period of time, you begin to realise that if you do this, then it's going to really help. And it's to do with what people are trying to use your music in. So, okay, let's say positive music, it builds. It starts off small, it grows. Building is this word that people always talk about. You have a sense of anticipation, something that's about to happen. The music can be all sorts of genres within that, but the mood is that you've got something building, and then you have a drop, as they call it now. You might have a little breath, a pause. You might go straight into something which is big, and then you get a full-scale climactic back end, and that's like a chorus. It could be all sorts of genre, but that sort of line, that line upwards to a big sort of climax.
It's a wedge.
It's a wedge. So, that's one thing. That's one thing that helps. But then also, equally, things where there's edit points. So you have to write in a different way when you do production music. You're not making music to listen to, so you have to keep thinking about, rather than through composing, you have little breaks and edit points. You have pauses between sections. You have, if it's a funky track, you have a little drum fill, which kind of just gives you a place to cut the picture to, or to kind of do an edit with. So those kind of elements of edit points, as we call them, are really important. So there are real structural things that will make a difference. Equally, the front end, give them. This has been hard for me to do because we had this transition from CD to digital, where CD is how long are you going to play the track for before you skip? Now, digital, you can see a waveform and you've maybe got a different interaction with that track. So you give someone something at the front end, which is a bit longer before hitting the big hit. But then it all swings around. So some people would say, no, start with the big statement, and then you can come out of it and then you can rebuild later on. So there's not one thing, but there's structures that work and will help you if you want to be successful.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I've always thought that to start start bold, because sometimes an editor might not listen beyond the first few seconds. But yeah, I mean, I'm at the same time, I'm also very aware that you obviously, I've sat next to editors and watched them. They sort of use the waveform as a guide to sort of drop in and listen to different points. And obviously they can skip through that track in a way that they couldn't initially with a CD, because you'd sort of get in, and if it wasn't right straight away.
It's interesting. I mean, I think, I'm always interested more about how people listen to music. I mean, I know that I can speed listen, I can go through, and I think this is what editors do. The genre will dictate to some extent. If it's a big hip hop track, you want to hit them with something big at the front, and then the groove can take over. If it's something which is really delicate and building, like a trailer track, then you will have that front end, which is like, mystery, anticipation, if I can say it. The genre dictates to a certain degree.
And what about hooks? In terms of sort of like a lot of the tracks on the Universal catalogue, do you notice that a lot of the successful ones have strong hooks? Or because you mentioned before that some tracks just sort of sit underneath and provide a rhythmical bed, but where do sort of hooks feature in terms of importance in your mind?
Okay, so the hook is really important if you want to nail that advert or promo, and it's that catchy thing that people like. So it could be the hook's part of the groove, and the groove just feels right. And the weird thing is that, so the royalties come quite a lot. If you have, we call them promos, they're basically just adverts for TV programs. If they get heavy revolution, they get played again and again. So every time it gets played, you get paid. So you can make a lot of money from that. And that's where the hooky music really helps. It's different from pop music because people aren't really singing it. They're not expecting it to be on their headphones or their streaming. I was going to say iPods. That's like, that's so old. No, it's not an iPod anymore.
On their Sony Walkmans.
On their Sony Walkmans. So, it's not quite the same as a pop thing where the hook is really, really important. I would say mood, and what the mood is that you're creating is probably more important than the hook. It's an easy word to say mood, but it can be really nuanced, and that's just important as a hook, I think.
Well, I suppose that's a defining factor when an editor's auditioning music is that's the initial impact is what's the mood, what's the tone, irrespective of hooks or genre, and that would be, I suppose, a critical point in terms in that split second of like, is this right for this scene or not?
Yeah.
Does it get shortlisted?
I mean, so I'll give you an example. There's a track called Golden Swagger, was the title I came up with. Some guys wrote, it's been huge. It's got a huge brass hook at the front. It goes into a hip hop beat. And it just works. It works with so many different contexts. That is a piece of hook music which is killing it. But then equally, there's another track which is this kind of like tone with some piano on top, doing some sort of like modal stuff, a bit like Thomas Newman. That kills it because it just gets used in all the documentaries, all the background stuff. So you can get, one's working for one thing, the other one's working for another thing. But if you can write a hook, then go for it. And we do like hooks in production music. We're up for it. So
yeah, you can always get the non-hook version, or use the stems to sort of not have it.
Oh yeah, to ruin it all.
Yeah. So another question then is sort of, okay, so we've kind of looked at what makes a good production music track, but what then makes a good production music album? Are you trying to kind of get a broad variety of different sort of moods and tones, or are you going to kind of stick to the same tone but explore that in different ways?
Okay, this has changed a lot and it's still under discussion. Being the old guy, so I remember the CD. The CD was basically, you had to cram as much as possible onto that CD because you're pressing it. So as many tracks as possible. We used to always do these things, we'd break it up into headings, like sections. So it'll be like a terrible title, which I hate, was called Youth Culture. It's like your uncle talking or something. And then basically, that was representing all the stuff that was going on the chart. So you'd have your hip hop beats, your indie, some kind of electronica dance stuff. But it was all under the heading Youth Culture. And that was back in the CD day. Nowadays, we still do albums, and we do like to kind of create something that people will flick through and find useful for more than one track. So there is always like a concept. There's a thing that we try and hang things in and place things in. But at the same time, I get people at my place saying, "Don't just give us the same kind of genre again and again. Give us some variations. We want things to change up." So I don't know. It's like the concept is quite important if you're recording or you're doing something, because you're having, maybe there's an ensemble that you're going to record. So you will often have an overarching concept and a sound, and ideally within that you'll have different flavors. And it's nice to put an outlier in, so it's like a slightly different track. And I shouldn't say it's like a cash cow or something, like a one that's really going to, that's sometimes how I think. But like, so the answer is albums. But the weird thing, so it's under discussion, because how do people find the music? They find it by search. It's tracks. It's not albums. Are we living in a album time? Do people really care about albums? Like full stop. Do they? I don't think so. So it kind of is the same in production music.
Yeah. Well, interesting. I don't know. In the last couple of days, Spotify have removed the shuffle button from Adele's latest album, haven't they? Because Adele has gone out and said this album is meant to make a statement, and you're meant to tell a story as you go through it, which obviously has massively changed because, as you say, people sort of cherry pick music. But it's interesting that you say that as well with relation to production music. But at a time when Adele has just sort of come out and gone, no, my music tells a story, so you shouldn't shuffle play it.
Well, I mean, no, hats off to her, because it's an album used to be a concept. Dark Side of the Moon. You don't shuffle that, do you? It's a thing. So I think for headphones music, definitely albums need to be really cherished, and people should try and listen to an album and go and actually use your record player if you have one with your vinyl that you bought, and like listen to it all the way through. Production music, it's this kind of thing which is a nice way of putting together a bunch of tracks. We don't do singles. We put them in some sort of concept, and then it will be like music for crime drama. It's a huge thing, like so many crime dramas being made. We'll have different shades of like eerie, really kind of like dark. Then there'll be something a bit more kind of like actiony. There's lots of shade and light you can do within that.
Yeah, sure. And you mentioned obviously this sort of amalgamation between these electronic beat producers and the sort of orchestral. Is there any other sort of albums where you've kind of spliced interesting genres? Because it's funny, as a composer, I always think there's so much sort of creative reward, but also hopefully it's in terms of trying to sort of break barriers and sort of fuse new genres and try and bring a bit of irreverence to what you're doing and trying to create something new. Are there any other sort of like albums that you've done where you've sort of spliced interesting genres together?
I mean, my favourite experience was back in a time when we were sampling from our own catalogue, and we would basically dig through the archives and get people to use this music and turn it into new stuff. And that was a really nice reinterpretation and just using these little fragments and doing new stuff with them. We don't do that so much now because it's complicated on the admin side. But yeah, I mean, this is a really good question now, because I'm like trawling through like all the things I've ever done. Like, what's the most interesting thing? I mean, it's really hard.
I suppose it could be even using interesting instruments. Doesn't necessarily need to be different genres, but where you kind of taken a kind of random instrument or...
I mean, it was one thing that was quite nice because trailer music, like, what can I say about trailer music? It's become this thing and it's like a trope, and we make the music, it makes money, and there's a reason for it. You're always trying to find something new to do. So I was lucky enough to work with Enon Zur, who's a really amazing composer. And we did this thing which was like a kind of virtuoso string quartet, and it was kind of dipping into the world of Baroque music, some really elaborate passages on the violin. You had a kind of a period thing going on, but it wasn't period, and it would kind of do a trailer thing. And that for me was like a really nice opportunity to do trailer music, but it's not just another trailer album. You know, there's a guy who did this trailer album for a colleague of mine, and he used loads of early instruments and like sort of like European early instruments. I can't even name what they are, but like there's a sound to them, and it just brings something new. There's, you know, you're always looking for trying to do something new. I mean, I'm working on a project hopefully next year where I'm going to be working with viola da gamba, maybe consort of viols, and there's a really rich sound to that instrument, which can just bring something extra to what would normally be just another string album. So I just did a short film, horror short, and using a nickel harper. And again, it's just I look back on the process, and what I wish I'd done is I wish I'd brought the nickel harpist in at the beginning, because what I did is I composed and then had them come in and sort of play stuff. Whereas actually there was so much fun to be had in the exploration of the nickel harper and what it can do, and getting all sort of crazy sounds out of it, which I think that would have probably informed the score in a different way, but it's just those unique textures, and you sort of the things that you listen to and go, oh, what's that? That's a bit weird, and it sort of piques your interest and your attention, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely always looking for new things to do. I mean, a lot of what we do has a purpose to it. It's quite functional, and that's the job I do, and that's fine. But just to have those extra elements, you know, like I really want to work with a gospel choir, but not doing gospel, but basically adding that sound of people singing to a chorus, which lifts everyone up, and they can just be doing non-worded vocals, but you put that in, and it's a human sound. It brings a humanity. It brings like a warmth to the thing, lifts your soul. It triggers something, because the sound of people singing in a gospel choir does something kind of immediately to your emotions. So that's like a sound source that I haven't worked with before. So I'm always looking for things like that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's funny. This is a recurring theme, and it's something that I sort of believe for many years. But obviously, as we talk about technology and everything, sort of we tend to work in the box these days and do everything within the computer. But when you do bring real instruments, and it's humanizing it, it's actually all those sort of little imperfections that you get from human beings being involved. Like I always think the imperfection of a groove, the imperfection of a beat is the groove. And you know, if you've got a choir of people, they're not all singing perfectly. You're not tuning all of their vocals. There's sort of slight imperfections, and same with strings and an orchestra. But all of that combines to provide this sort of rich human an emotion, a level of emotion that you just can't get from using sort of samples, or certainly, you know, having everything sort of cut to grid really strictly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm interested in sort of going into, you mentioned sort of Dark Side of the Moon and there's a couple of other sort of musical references. I sort of go into just sort of have a look in a minute to have a listen to, you know, what music shaped you. Just before we do, because I'm conscious that there may be some people listening to this who are getting into composing or are in composing and sort of learning about production music. If you've got advice for people who would like to sort of get into production music, what would you think what would you advise?
Okay, if you're going to try and contact someone in a production music library company, you need to present a small amount of music that you can listen to quickly and easily. So ideally a SoundCloud link. Don't send a WeTransfer, which will expire. Don't send MP3s, which are really heavy and just bog down your inbox. That's basics. But, you know, carve a sound, work on something and make something special. Don't try and think, I can do all these different types of styles. Here, look, I can do jazz and rock and whatever. You know, find a thing that you can really do well. You know, I'm after people who've got specialist kind of skills and a sound. It's really hard because we do have like an inbox. We have a demo submission box. Some companies don't. I mean, Extreme Music's like, don't contact us. We'll find you if we need you. We don't do that. But the truth is, you have to be patient. You know, it will take time for your music to be listened to. You won't hear back immediately. Don't hammer emails constantly because it doesn't really help. Having something to say is good. It's like, check out this track which was placed in this advert. Check out what I did here because it's done this. Rather than just going, I'm here, look at me. Give me some reason to want to engage. It's really hard because like there's so many people. It's difficult to listen to all the music.
It's tough, isn't it? It's which is you can't get the interest of a production music library without the sync, and then you can't get the sync without. Well, that's not true. Obviously, there are ways of getting syncs of.
I mean, you can. It's weird because some people's careers are made because they knew a film director or a film producer, and that's unfortunately. I mean, they had to have the skill. They needed to have the skill. They didn't just fall out of the air. They needed to have the talent, but their break came from knowing someone and making a film.
Well, I suppose if nothing else, that highlights the importance of relationships, and I think probably something that I subscribe to is it's very easy in the modern world to try and create or nurture relationships online, whereas actually there's no substitute for face-to-face, in person, notwithstanding global pandemics.
Yeah, obviously it's been pretty tricky. No meetings recently. Still can't have anybody in our building, but like, yeah, I mean, of course, the relationship is, for me, I want to get to know the person musically and creatively. And it's so much easier to work with people when you've met them face to face. You've had that chat. You can talk much more freely. Just to getting the foot in the door, I don't know what. There's not like one easy answer. You've got to work at your skills, work at your sound. To be honest, the truth is, if you make something and the mix sounds really good, the mix is really important. Come to me. If a track will pop out and it'll be like, this is really good. Who is this? There's hundreds of people just doing mediocre stuff. The mixes aren't great. Compositionally, it's okay. Excite my ears, make me think this sounds professional.
And I suppose the only way to do that is with mixing is just to mix and mix again.
Well, the mix thing is a whole journey. It's like you have to train your ears to critical listening and open up your ears to sound and how it works, and then you have to do it to learn it. You can't just learn it quickly, and you need to really be on. That's something you craft over a period of time.
Yeah.
So talking about the electronic producers, they basically focused on a style, and they can nail that now because they know how to do synthesis and bass and to program a beat because they've done it so many times. And that's why I want to work with them.
Specialist rather than generalist.
Getting a taste.
I think it would be good to kind of get a taste. You've mentioned a couple of albums of. You mentioned your sort of interest in sort of kids, sort of TV themes when you were growing up. Can you sort of trace back your kind of sort of life and sort of pick out seminal moments where either a particular film score or a particular album or something has sort of like had a profound effect and perhaps sort of shaped your, where you are today?
I mean, it's a really hard one. I was thinking about this, and so my thing was I was drawn to the sound of the orchestra. So I always loved orchestral music, but equally there was something about synthesis and that otherworldly sound that really piqued my interest. So it's interesting, I've got colleagues and friends, and we all went down this journey of like, so I'll give you an example, the obvious one. So Chariots of Fire, as well as learning to play that piece at school, which was quite fun, in front of everyone, there's a track called Abraham's Theme, and it's really simple. There's not much going on, but there's this like little portamento synth sound, which I now know is a CS80 because it's got this little felt portamento thing, and it's the thing where you're like, what is that? What is that sound? I don't know where it comes from. Jean-Michel Jarre, synthesis, the electronic, radiophonic electronic I'll say it again. The radiophonic workshop, it gets talked about a lot, but it's that kind of otherworldly sound which excited me when I was younger. My journey through music has been this kind of different stages of like discovery, and really, I don't know if it's a film score thing. It's more like discovering Zukus music and like sitar and like different scales in world music. Discovering there was when I did A-level, we got played some Steve Reich. I'd never heard of minimalist music, and I was like, "What is this? This is really good. I need to know about this." And like it was like that was an epiphany, just as a music lesson. There's I suppose I don't think there's been key scores. Maybe I don't know. Vangelis has been like as a standout. Everyone loves John Williams. It just goes without saying. But like, it's sort of like that wasn't that an epiphany? I don't know. Yeah. So my journey has been through different stages because I'm pre-internet. It was all about discovering music more organically. So someone would have a record, or mate's dad would have a record collection. You'd find this thing. What is this? Discovering jazz, discovering world music, discovering Pink Floyd and all the psychedelic stuff, all different parts of a journey. Then tuning into pirate radio, listening to rave music, thinking, "What's this? This is," and it's all about new. So it's like there's been a lack of new recently, which is a real shame. Because I've lived through periods where like dubstep, but like I've never heard of anything like this. What is this music? It's just this weird bass thing going to clubs, people doing halftime dancing. Influences. It's not like one thing I can say influenced me. But even like in the classical side, like listening to Debussy and thinking, what are these chords? This isn't This isn't Mozart. He's doing some really weird chords and sounds, and it's like beautiful. I know what it is now, but that really caught my ear, and I was like, I wanted to know. And then going and listening to Thomas Tallis, and it was like Spare Me an Alien, this amazing piece of vocal music, and it's just there's the sound of it. It's like it's this cacophony of different vocal parts coming. It's a 4-part piece. The kind of those, it's really weird. All these things are popping in my mind. Those are kind of points where you're like, "What? Wow, what is this?"
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as well because I think it's something that you keep sort of referring back to as well. Is like it's always something sonically interesting, something that's you've not heard before, something that's maybe unexpected is what sort of piqued your interest and sort of created a level of curiosity, which has sort of led you down perhaps this sort of rabbit hole of sort of exploring that more and more, and which it kind of also ties in with what you were talking about with sort of the production music and the albums that you're producing, is looking for interesting ways, interesting new takes, because obviously it's very hard to do something which is completely original. There's only so many notes, there's only so many combinations of those notes, but by drawing on lots of different influences and sort of ideas and hopefully sort of moulding that into something unique, that's how you sort of pique the listener's attention, and that goes from from consuming music from a commercial perspective, but also for people who are sort of professionally doing music and sort of I always think of Johan Johansson. There was the score for Sicario and the score for Arrival. They were both scores where I was like, "Whoa!" It's like this is very cool. What's going on here? So then you sort of look into it, and it's Johan Johansson, and it's like, wow, this sort of opens up a new world.
Well, there's a thing there with the sound thing. It was the descending basses and cellos.
Basses, yeah.
And it became like everyone was like, "What is that?" And it was like, "Whoa, what is that?"
And now it's everywhere.
Now everyone's doing it. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? No, these things pop up and they capture your attention, and Johan was a brilliant composer. I loved him. Such a shame that he passed away, but so it's not one thing, but I think sound and just the sound experience is what captures my attention.
One other last quick question. So you mentioned earlier we talked about TV themes, and you talked about we talked about Netflix, where maybe themes are sort of coming back a little bit. Are there any particular series that you've watched recently where the music's caught your attention?
my lockdown experience, there's two programs that I was loving during lockdown.
Tiger King.
And obviously Tiger King was there. Yeah, of course, we all love that. I mean, musically, I don't think they were like groundbreaking musically. So I'm going to mention the two things. Basically, Grayson Perry's Art Club. There's a guy called Alexander Parsons did the music to it, and I went and Googled him, and he's really interesting. Basically, he's this kind of composer where it's very subtle what he does, but you know that he's paying attention to sound. He's got modular synths, he plays the violin, he does these little subtle things. He's got this like Farfisa organ, he does this kind of quirky thing with, and it's crafted. It's like it's music with TV, but it's crafted. He's put some time and thought, how do I get this sound right? It's not just gone to Omnisphere and what I'll do. It's more than that. So that program was a brilliant program as well. There was like some, was it Mortimer and Whitehouse gone fishing. And what was really interesting about that was a soundtrack of music which has been chosen by a music supervisor. It's not being composed. But there was a thread to it. And it's really great because someone's made a Spotify playlist. Thank you to the people who make these and found all the cues. And it's a really great so the music's obviously matching the mood of the program, which is like fishing. It's relaxed, it's chilled out, but some really great old blues, really lovely guitar tones in there. Loads of Richard Hawley, which I should mention. He's a brilliant artist. You should go and check out. And I just remember watching the program and also Shazamming, thinking, what is this track? Because it's just a really beautiful, simple guitar tune, maybe electric, but with some slide in it, and it's just blues, and it's just oozes warmth, and it's got some character to it. Some tracks from that really caught my attention. And then the other thing was that the recent thing, I have to say it, Hans Zimmer, God damn him, damn Hans Zimmer, he's gone and nailed it. Zimmer. I mean, like, I get slightly frustrated with the way that Hans Zimmer just is on everything, and you're like, come on, there's other people in the world. But so I went to see Dune. I was looking forward to that film for ages, and oh my god, the soundtrack is. The film needs the soundtrack to be good because it's got loads of stuff where there's no dialogue. So Hans had a great opportunity to do stuff. He, sonically, the sound engine, the sound production on that was amazing. So I went to see that film. What do? I get straight back home. Immediately, I'm looking up Spotify to find the soundtrack. Then I have to work out what's going on the piano. And I realise it's like basically two chords. So he's kind of like, because this is how my mind works. I always do this. I'm like, what did he do? What did he do? And then he's got an approximation of like a Middle Eastern scale that he's using. And then obviously it's much more than two chords because it's all about sonics. It's got this singing. It's got the vocals. It's got and he just does it and he just kills it. And I've got a feeling that might be up for Oscar's best score.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting as well because obviously it's blurring the lines between sound design and music, isn't it? It's kind of really bringing those two worlds together, and it adds an intensity to that film. There's you kind of realise when you come out of it, it's like there's barely a moment in the film where there isn't some music or sound going on, and it really kind of it's just, you come out of it and you're like, oh god, it's relentless, but in a good way.
Yeah, and totally. And, a great gig to get because the film really lends itself to a composer doing his stuff. But so integral to the experience of the film. And so, hats off to him. Hopefully there'll be some other Hanses around that we can.
He's not going anywhere, is he? He's
not.
You'd think he'd have retired by now, but he's still doing more scores per year than is sort of humanly feasible.
And obviously no help from a massive team of other people.
No, remote control is not involved.
No, it's just him. It's just him.
Yeah,
but that's my pick.
That's great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to sort of kind of wrap it up now. I like to finish with the trivia sort of section, but actually you have just probably the best bit of trivia ever that Going for Gold theme tune was done by Hans Zimmer. So what I do with every episode is I'm going to put links to every sort of bit of music or person referenced in the show notes. I had a bit of trivia for you. Do you know which film soundtrack stayed at, so not film soundtrack, which a piece of music from a film stayed at number 1 in the UK charts for the longest period of time?
Yeah, Saturday Night Fever.
No.
It's not Saturday Night Fever.
It's not, no.
Oh, okay. What?
Saturday Night Fever was the biggest selling movie soundtrack of all time.
Right.
With Whitney Houston's The Bodyguard a close second. But I'm talking about songs which featured in film which were number 1. And which track was it? Who was it by? And how long was it a number 1 for?
Oh, that's a tough one. Do you want me to have a stab at it? I've got to.
Shall I give you a clue?
Yeah, go on.
Kevin Costner.
Oh, for fuck's sake! Yes, that piece of music. Everything I do it for you.
Yeah, Bryan Adams.
I just hate that piece of music so much. I can't stand it. I was lucky enough to work at Battery Studios, where the piano that he used was there, and it was like, oh, this is the piano we play that. It's like, I don't give a fuck. It's shit. It's like, sorry.
Well, after 16 weeks of hearing it like 7 times a day on the radio, it's going to wear pretty thin, isn't it? There's no doubt.
Oh my God.
Do you know what's a close second?
No.
Wet, wet, wet. Love is all around.
Oh, okay. It's slightly less irritating as a piece of music. But so I do have one piece of extra trivia for you.
Oh,
but
yeah,
you don't have to use it. I mean, you can.
I will absolutely use it.
Okay, I don't know what. So basically, the Knight Rider theme is a classic theme. Everyone loves it from the 80s. It's really like iconic. But
you're not going to ruin something for me. You like tell me that Santa Claus isn't real.
Well, I'm going to ruin it a little bit. But basically, so the guy who wrote Knight Rider has been living off that for a long time. But he actually ripped off someone. There's a track called Sphinx by Harry Thuman. And it's a total and utter rip. And when you hear it, you're like, oh my God, you basically just ripped him off. I mean, it's a long told story of people homaging or using other people's ideas. But it's just this kind of weird thing when someone pointed that out to me, it's like, but this is the Knight Rider theme. I've loved this all my life. Like, you're telling me he just basically ripped this guy. So sorry to kill it, but
well, I don't know. I don't think it's killed it. I mean, I'll certainly go and A/B the two and see if I can sort of hear the difference. But
check it out.
It will always, it's a bit like Michael Jackson. Like, his music is great, irrespective of what's happened since he died or what's come to light. His music will always live on in my heart. So yeah, I
mean, that's like me. I was a Morrissey fan. I love the Smiths. Listen to Morrissey now. He's like, please shut up. Please, don't stop. Just stop talking. But no. I mean, look. I mean, that's my trivia for you.
That's great. I love it. It's brilliant. So I'm going to finish up with a couple of quick fire questions. What's your favourite biscuit?
I love podcasts. Favourite biscuit, chocolate hobnob.
Chocolate hobnob. For any Americans listening, that's a cookie. What's a little known fact about Andrew Stannard?
Little known fact is my earliest memories are from Hong Kong. I was living in Hong Kong when I was 3.5.
Oh, wow.
So my first memories of life going to a market and seeing someone chop a chicken's head up. And say, here's a chicken.
Traumatic childhood. Yes. Witnessing horrific animal abuse. Very cool. What scares you?
Well, actually, recently, I'm getting this fucking ridiculous vertigo. But really? So I do get vertigo. But I don't watch horror films. Basically, I get scared really easily. I watched The Conjuring, the Enfield Conjuring. I was like, this is scaring me. This is not helping me go to bed.
No, I'm kind of with you on that. It's like I find it very difficult to put myself through an uncomfortable situation, and watching a horror film, if it's done well, is just that. So
yeah.
And finally, what piece of advice, if you could go back in time, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh wow, this is like therapy. That's something. Get off your ass and stop being so fucking lazy.
Hey, getting off your ass and being... I think I'd have probably saved myself 15, 20 years if I'd have gone back and given myself that advice. I probably wouldn't have listened, though, because I was too lazy to listen. So, but hey. Okay. Awesome. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It's been incredibly interesting and insightful. Good luck with the new Viola da Gamba.
Viola da Gamba, I know. It's very posh.
Other challenges of 2022. And I'll catch up soon.
Thanks. It's been really great talking to you. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, and given that you've listened this far, I feel you might have, then I would be honoured and incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. By subscribing, you'll automatically be notified each time a new episode drops, and by rating the show, you tell the artificial intelligence that will soon be running the world that this podcast is worth listening to. I certainly get a lot of insights and value from these conversations, and I genuinely hope you do too. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, then you can email me, podcast@larpmusic.com. Larpmusic.com is my digital abode, and the home of the podcast is larpmusic.com/Sync Music Matters Podcast. And Sync Music Matters Podcast is hyphenated. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.